All right, so let's see. Well, Matt, it's great to be with you. I'm so excited that we're doing this interview. I've been thinking about real estate quite a bit just because you keep seeing the prices go up and up and
Right.
up. And I've been talking with a lot of clients, some younger clients, some older clients, everyone in between. They're getting frustrated with this current
Yeah.
market environment, and I'm sure you're seeing that with your own clients. So I'm just curious, what's your perspective right now with everything that's been going on in the real estate market and this current environment that you're in? How would you kind of explain this to the average American and what's going on right now?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, we're definitely seeing, um, I guess I'd put it, there's a lot of competition and there's just really a lack of supply. Just, it's really a supply issue, is what we're seeing. There's, there's not very much inventory out there and there's just a lot of people looking for homes. So what that's doing is just creating a lot of competition, your basic supply and demand, type of thing.
Yeah, and I've been hearing too that people have been um, foregoing the inspection,
Yeah.
and which to me is crazy.
Right.
And my worry is in looking at this is that there's so much competition, there's so much limited supply that people are, it's almost like, well, I just have to get in now before I get priced out again and again.
Right.
So I get, what are your thoughts looking forward, especially with, like, do you think the inventory will improve, or do you think it's only going to get worse from here?
Well, I think we're, again, nationally, we're behind about 1.5 million homes, from the demand out there. And then in the Portland area, we don't see it really improving a lot. Just to give a perspective, so right now we've got about um, zero point 0.8 months of inventory, and of meaning if we didn't list any more homes, that's how long it would take to get through everything. A normal market's about 4 months, give or take. And to give that perspective, when we were at the bottom of the market in the last recession, so in December of 2011, we were at 19.2 months. So there's just a big gap on that one. So just that's just from a perspective standpoint, I don't see it improving dramatically on the inventory.
Mhm.
And I think what's happening is we are seeing clients being really, really competitive if they want to get a home, because they want to capture the interest, they want to capture the low interest rates. They want to get something. There's inflation going on, so they're feeling like, okay, I want to own something. Um, and we're seeing across the board where people are waiving inspections, they're releasing earnest money right off the bat. Yeah, so they're doing things that we weren't recommending a couple of years ago. We'd say, hey, take
Yeah.
your time and do it, but now we got to do it to get it.
Yeah, so, well, you've been doing this for many years now, so you remember like '05, '06, and I remember that time because we bought our first house in
Yeah.
2009, and at that point the, Great Recession had hit. We got a great deal. I think we paid less for our house in 2009 than the previous owner had paid when they bought it like 6 years prior to that. So timing wise for us, it worked out. But I very vividly recall back in 2005 thinking that I couldn't afford to buy a house yet because I was just like getting ready to be done with college. So I'm completely broke. But I remember thinking, if I don't buy now, prices are just going to keep going up, 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 up.
Mhm.
And I'm going to be priced out of this market and I'm not going to be able to buy a house. And I would guess that maybe that's a sentiment that your clients are
Mhm.
experiencing. But then of course that didn't happen. And we had this very sharp downturn in home prices, lots of foreclosures, lots of short sales, and it changed very quickly. Do you foresee a drop in the real estate market, maybe driven by higher interest rates or something that could kind of,
Mm.
or a recession that could really drive down home prices and then create better inventory, better situation for someone who's maybe trying to buy a home right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, one, I don't have the crystal ball, so I don't know exactly what's going to happen. However, I would say this is I look at a couple things. I look at population projections and the supply. And and I lived for a few years in California, and I saw the humanity down there. And I just see that, okay, prices just kind of kept going up as people were moving into these areas. And Portland, in our metro area, we're having that. We're having people move here. So and then just to think there, are we going to have a recession? I mean, yes, we will have a recession at some point. Everything's going to cycle. Will prices go down? I think so at some point, but how much? We don't know. I guess what the thing to kind of think about is, again, I always look at population, and then I always just think about what's our time frame. How long are we going to be in the house? And that's something I talk about with every client is if you're going to be in the house for a long period of time, say 5+ years, then it's not going to matter too much, as long as you can afford that monthly payment and you can sleep at night knowing, okay, I can make my payments and feel good about it.
Yeah.
If you're going to be in there for 2 years, I've talked clients out of buying if their plan is only to be in the house for 2 years. Then I would say, hey, maybe it's better to rent in that type of scenario. And do I think will prices come down? And will there be a lot more inventory? I don't see that happening.
Yeah, just because of the demographics that you were talking
Just
about. Yeah.
just because of the demographics, I think it may slow down a little bit once interest rates go up. But I don't see it having all this massive inventory. I do think I would tell my own kids, like, hey, if you're going to be there for the long haul, buy.
Yeah. So a lot of clients that I work with and a lot of people who listen to this podcast, when you're getting close to retirement, one of the things, especially if you live in the northern half of the United States,
Yeah.
one of the things that enters into the picture if you have enough in assets is to consider buying a second home somewhere down
Yeah.
south where you can be a snowbird in winter. So,
Yeah.
what's your take on, and then of course in Oregon here we have, my husband is always bugging me about wanting to buy a beach house. And I'm
Mhm.
like, no, well, A, we'll never go there. I know that because we
Yeah.
have young kids and we're busy. But like, that's not as much of a consideration for someone who's older, closer to retirement, who can have that time to travel more. So, but for the average American, do you think it's a good time to be looking at a vacation home or a second home or even an investment property? Does that same timeline, that same time horizon still apply, or how are the considerations
Yeah.
different for somebody who's looking at either an investment property, a vacation home, or some type of second home?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great thought, because we're seeing a lot the last couple of years. We've seen a lot of people buying up second homes in Bend, the beach, down south in Palm Springs, and so forth. And I think it comes back to what the individual's goals are. That's really what I always, when I'm sitting down with a client, is what are their goals. So if they're looking at rental property, then I would just say yes. I don't think there's a bad time. It's ever bad to buy rental property, as long as you're planning on keeping it for the long haul and you can make it cash flow. So regardless of what the market does, you've got tenants paying your rent, your mortgage. You've got depreciation tax benefits, pay down of the mortgage, and ultimately, and it's some cash flow, and ultimately it'll get paid off. So I think rental property is kind of it's off to its side, and I always think that's a good thing to buy if it makes sense. Vacation homes, that's going to be an emotional piece there. Like for instance, my wife and I, we talked about buying a vacation home at one point, but we realized that we like to travel to different places.
Yeah,
So
me too.
we don't want to go to the same spot all the
Right. You
time.
feel like now you're forced to go to this place because you don't want to flush your money that you're spending on it down the drain every
Right.
month. So,
Yeah. You're obligated to go.
yeah.
And then and then just the fact that, I like to stay in nicer places than probably what I could afford for a vacation home.
Yeah.
So,
You and me both. Yeah, exactly.
so we just say, hey, we would rather go and buy rental property, and then just fund the vacation homes when we just go rent a vacation home on Airbnb or VRBO. Now that's an our age demographic. Now with the older age demographic, I think it just depends on what their cash flow and income is.
Yeah.
and how much they're going to use it. Could they, like, if they have a vacation home, could they rent it out when they're not there? Um, I think there's things to be thinking about, or could they Airbnb? There's so many of these other little mechanisms in the real
Mhm.
estate market where people can make money, such as VRBO, Airbnb. I think people just really have to flow it out on a pad of paper and say,
Right.
hey, does the money make sense, or do I want to have my stuff, my surfboard or my snow skis in the closet all ready to go, or
Yeah.
do I want to haul those over with me?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. In my experience, most clients, especially if they retire standard ages, let's say they retire at 60 to 65, a lot of them do want to spend those early years in retirement doing the things that they couldn't do when they were working because they didn't have the time. So I would say more active travel lifestyle. But it's interesting because you could buy an investment or property or a vacation home, and even if you don't use it, like you were saying, if you were willing to rent it out, and that could help pay for it. And
Yeah.
then maybe later in retirement, when you're less interested in globetrotting and you want something that is you can go to and have that place in a warm climate. I have so many clients who they complain about their arthritis is way worse when they're in Oregon in the wintertime, so they like to go down south because they have freedom from their ailments down there. So
Yeah.
there's all these other considerations. But I wanted to go back to the rental property, the investment property piece for a minute, because
Yeah.
I'm curious, in your experience when you work with clients who are looking for rentals, is that market more competitive or about the same or less competitive than the typical home buyer who's just looking for their primary residence?
Yeah. So the thing to keep in mind when somebody's buying a rental property, it's all based on just numbers. It's not emotional. Versus when we've got a first time home buyer or who's going to be living in it, it's an emotional purchase. So that emotional purchase is going to be much more competitive. They're willing to waive everything, is what we find.
Yeah.
When we find on the investment side, it's all about the numbers. And it tends to be it's not going to be as competitive in that side.
Mm.
And a lot of times
That
people might,
surprises me. Are you surprised by that, that's not as it's not as competitive? Why do you think there's just less people looking for rentals and investment property compared to people who are looking to buy their primary residence?
yeah, I do. I think there's people, and again, it depends on what category investors are looking at. If it's a single family or it's a multifamily, if they're looking at multifamily, there's not going to be as many buyers looking at a small duplex or a
Hmm.
fourplex, versus if they're looking at a rental house, a cute little rental house, they're going to be, or a single family home, they're going to be competing with all the owner occupied buyers.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Um, gosh, I'm trying to think of. Oh, another thing that comes up quite a bit. So right now, as people get older, retire, other than maybe considering a second home or vacation home or some sort of investment property, a lot of clients tend to want to downsize. And,
Yeah, yeah,
they're empty nesters now. They don't need all the square footage that they have, and so they're looking to downsize. Um, so what are your thoughts on that? Because to me it seems like there's probably not a better time than right now. If you are selling your house, it's probably worth,
hmm,
quite a bit more than it was even a year ago. And then you're going down in the market, and so maybe it's more competitive
hmm,
down market, but it seems to me like the financial decision there, if you're going to downsize, is pretty advantageous to the average
yeah.
retiree or pre-retiree who's in that situation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a good time for someone to look at downsizing. And I think kind of the process where we tend to help people is they've got that big 4,000 square foot house and they're with stairs and they want to get to a one level. That's a common thing that we run into. And so what we tend to do is like, okay, let's sell, take advantage of the market. And then probably what we have to do is we might have to go rent something for a little bit and then
Hmm.
find till we can find that one level. Cause there's not a lot of single levels in the market right now.
Yeah, I know.
And that's just,
I have a client who's been looking pretty seriously for over a year now.
oh,
They're
wow.
here in the Portland area and just I mean they do have kind of a long checklist of demands, I guess, but they're just mainly looking for something that has a master bedroom on the
Mhm.
first floor, no stairs, and it seems like here in Portland that there's just not a lot of those because you need a lot of land, and
Right.
it's not the maybe the best use for the builder of the home to kind of build those
Right.
one levels, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that for someone who has has a very specific wish list in a competitive market who, I certainly wouldn't want to be renting something for 3, 4 years and have that
Yeah.
uncertainty of, am I ever gonna find
Right.
what we're looking for?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's a good thing on the downsizing if it makes sense for them. And I just advise clients, we're going to probably have to look out in the outskirts of the city because again, the Portland and the metro area is all about density because of the
Hmm.
urban growth boundary. So we have to go out to the outskirts, and that might mean Wilsonville, Hillsborough, Beaverton, maybe even into Columbia County at times.
Yeah.
So we've just got to go look and just kind of see what's out there.
Yeah, and I would imagine for people, who are listening who aren't in Portland area, it's similar if they in different metro areas all across the country, right? You have to
Yeah.
just not wanting to live in the urban environment. Although there's certainly a lot of one levels in dense urban areas when you think about like the condos and
Hmm.
technically, you might be on the
Yeah.
fifth floor, but there's no stairs.
You got the elevator. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's the beauty
exactly.
with condos is it's just when you want to travel, you just close the door and lock it and head out. So
Yeah,
that's why people like condos.
yeah. Well, great. Well, what else? What else have I not asked you that should be on the minds or maybe is on the minds of someone who's getting close to retirement and thinking about doing some type of real estate transaction?
One thing I think that's interesting is in Oregon, we're getting rid of single family zoning in the in the bigger cities. So what it's allowing is more density within on lots. So like a typical 5,000 square foot lot, you used to maybe be able to put an ADU on. Now, like within Portland, you can put a couple ADUs on an
Hmm.
accessory dwelling unit. So I think is one thing that as we start to go down this path that maybe retirees start to think about is maybe I build an ADU and maybe I live in there part time and then rent out the main house. And then I could have, if I wanted to travel, I could go to other parts of the country, but I've always got a home base there on my property.
Yeah, that's giving you cash flow and
It gives you
income.
some, yeah, it gives you some income as you're going into these years. And it
That's,
gives you flexibility.
yeah, that's interesting. I love that. That's a good tip. All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much. This was
Thanks, Ashley.
very enlightening, and I just appreciate your time and your expertise.
All right.